but sometimes we need that. I think that is why when you look at spiritual disciplines in our life, silence and solitude are a part of spiritual discipline. We all ought to have times in our life, times throughout our year, and probably more regularly than that, when we are able to be by ourselves in silence.
Yeah.
Not because that's the only time that God is going to speak to us, but to remind us of how often the other voices in our life can drown out his voice.
Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we take a deeper dive into Sunday's message and explore any questions you might have. I'm your host, AJ Stevens, joined by lead pastor Chip Parker, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops. Welcome back. Podcast. Me, Chip, and the Deucer this week.
And the Deucer. We finally talked Christopher Curtis.
Yes.
Media man extraordinaire to set up a microphone for himself.
We love it.
Hello, everybody.
So if you hear just injected wisdom into this podcast, it's 100% Chris.
Yeah.
I'm just across the room on a couch while they're at the table.
Yeah, but we have you here for a reason, right? Because this morning, you're going to be the expert. We're not. And we're going to have some fun with it.
It's true.
So I'm excited to see what Chris is capable of. I'm excited to get a little sneak peek into Chris's childhood this morning. And I guess there's a sense in which I might even be a little jealous this morning, Chris, if your childhood was full of more vegetable characters than mine, and how much of that you retain. So, Chip, why don't you lead us into this?
All right, so I didn't know we were jumping in right away. I'm here to jump in right away because I feel like, I don't just feel like, the reality is VeggieTales has been catching some strays on this podcast for a little bit. You know, especially last week.
Well,
when
here's
we
my
realized
question.
They lied to us about what is a vegetable.
You said stray, Chip, and I'm trying to figure out, did you learn that on TikTok? Did you steal that from a TikTok,
All right.
or did you know that? Because all the buzz is around Chip's Gen Z language.
I've been asked about this a few times. Did you steal those Gen Z words that you made up?
Yeah.
And so let me answer that question. Yes, I stole the words too. I never claimed to have made them up.
Yeah.
That was an assumption everybody made. I said very clearly, go back and listen to the podcast because I did. I have some words. Well, I started freaking out. I was like, did I just lie to everybody on there? I said, I have some fake Gen Z words. Now, I guess it's the curse of knowledge, right? I knew that I wasn't making up Gen Z language. But in fairness, everybody who's listened to this podcast who knows me, shame on you. You should have all known I couldn't make up a Gen Z word. I can barely deal with English as it is.
But you got a middle schooler in your house, you know? And so I'm thinking, I'm thinking, man, Chip is locked and loaded. He's ready to roll. He's a little more Gen Z than I thought. And
no, I'm not. However, my Gen Z son did come up with a Gen Z slang term, you know, because one of the Gen Z slang that we didn't use in the, quiz or whatever was charisma, right? And so the Rizzler is a guy who has riz, right?
So you say charisma, like in this culture's connotation, it's not just I have charisma. That's the word they're riffing off of.
Yeah, that's the word they're riffing off of. It is like riz is, if you're growing up in the early 2000s, late 90s like me, you had game.
Game, boy.
You had game.
That's great.
But Haddon has come up with the slang phrase, it's not the Rizzler, he's Theodore Roosevelt.
Boy.
Theodore Roosevelt, the president of Riz.
That's good. I love it. Well, I'm glad you went on record and cleared that up because there was a bunch of people out there that were, A, thinking you were a genius.
Get out my inbox.
Thinking you were a liar. So that's good. I'm glad we...
Neither genius nor liar. All right. So back to the topic at hand, VeggieTales catching strays on the podcast.
Yes.
And again, deservedly so, because neither a tomato nor, turns out, a cucumber is a vegetable.
Crazy.
Both fruit.
Yeah.
Crazy, right? Botanically, they're fruit, not vegetables.
Didn't see that coming.
However, I think we need to give due respect to VeggieTales because they're a part of our childhood. If you grew up in a conservative Christian home in the 90s, early 2000s, at some point, you had to watch VeggieTales.
Yeah.
Now, we can blame it on younger cousins, siblings, but we watch VeggieTales.
We watched it, right? It's
Larry
like,
Boy.
I wasn't really watching Hannah Montana. My sister was watching it, but I was locked into Hannah Montana.
Okay, maybe
right?
you just told on yourself.
You know what I mean?
because That was
We needed some-
that was not.
All right, Gary.
that was not
All
where I'm
right,
at.
go ahead.
All right, so here's where we're going with this. Is I have two guys in the room. We got AJ and the Deucer here who are both younger than I am, far more exposed to VeggieTales than I am, and I want to put their VeggieTales knowledge to the test. And I'm going to do this with a finish the lyric VeggieTales version. All right? So here's how this game
I
is.
wish we could buzz in. Like,
Here's how this game is going to work. Oh, what did you say?
Ding, ding.
What did you say? Yeah, you are going to buzz in. First rule of the game is you have to buzz in, but you cannot use the same buzzer noise twice.
Okay. I feel like I'm about to get smoked.
So you gotta
I will have some cool buzzer noises, but I'm about to get smoked.
All right, so it's going to be finish the lyric, okay? At any point that you want to stop me and finish the lyric, you go right ahead, but you better make sure you know what lyric I'm actually asking for.
Are we talking? All right, here's a question. Before we dive in, are we talking like any scene from any VeggieTales?
No, just
Are
songs. Songs.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, there's songs in the VeggieTales,
Yeah.
but then there's also silly songs with Larry.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, it's both.
Both.
I know.
All right.
That's going to
Here
be
we
the hard
go.
part.
All right.
We're going to go with a trial run.
'Kay.
Trial run, okay? Remember to buzz in, please, with your buzzers.
Okay.
Okay. If you like to talk to tomatoes, if
Yeah,
AJ.
you like to talk to tomatoes.
keep going, I wasn't there yet.
Oh, you aren't?
No.
All right, well, let's finish.
You just repeated what he said.
All right, here we go. If you like to talk to tomatoes, if a squash can make you smile, if you like to blank with potatoes.
Ding, ding.
Chris.
Waltz.
Waltz with potatoes.
Good, Chris. Chris won. We got to keep a score sheet.
Well, no,
here.
that was practice round. That
That's
was
good.
practice round. All
Good,
right.
I almost botched the practice. This ain't looking good for the home team. All right.
I'm going to use
All
my
right.
ding again.
So
because
we
it
are
was
going to
practice
take
round.
we're going to take the first question though from the theme song once again. Contestants, please buzz in when you are ready to answer. Lima beans, collard greens, peachy keen, VeggieTales, cauliflower, blank and blank.
Ding, ding, ding.
Oh, you
Chris,
got me.
Sweet and sour.
sweet and sour.
Half an hour.
VeggieTales. Nice. All right. So that is 1 point for the Deucer. 1 point for the. Who's keeping score? All right. We'll figure it out.
Just keep it on your
You
hand,
are.
Chris.
I'm keeping score. 1 point for Chris. All right. Here we go. This next finish the lyric is from the Hairbrush song.
Oh, yeah.
Gosh. Okay. All right.
Back there is my hairbrush. Back there is my hairbrush. Back there, oh, blank, back there. Oh, where, back there is my hairbrush. So let me read that line again.
Yeah. Maybe sing
Back
it
there
for us.
is my hairbrush.
Buzz,
back
buzz.
there.
Oh, where?
That is correct. I'm going to give
Okay.
you credit. I said,
Okay.
oh, the blank was where.
Oh, okay.
The blank was where.
Yeah, that's what was throwing me off because you said where, so I was like,
I
was it
did.
where?
I said, back there, oh, blank, back there.
Okay. Oh, where's my hairbrush?
Yeah. Not bad. All right, next song.
I was thinking it in my head.
Me too. I was trying to get it.
All right, so that's 2 for Chris. AJ, are you feeling the pressure yet?
No, I had a feeling he was going to be a ringer at this game.
All right, so this one comes from Silly Songs with Larry's. All right, Silly Songs with Larry.
It's a lip. I mean, it's a lip. All right, go ahead. Sorry.
All right, so here's what we're going to do with this one. Change it up just a little bit. I am going to read some of the lyrics. You have to name the song.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I like
Okay.
this.
Okay.
Okay?
Name the song, though.
All right, here we go. Miren al pequeño, bien como se mueve, como un león, trans un ratón. Watch the cucumber.
Buzz.
Chris.
Barber Manatee.
No. Incorrect. AJ.
I don't know, but if we had any Spanish listeners, we'll go.
Oh, no, I'm
They're
singing a
done.
different song. Oh,
All right.
they say French in that song.
No, this
Nice.
is actually Dance of the Cucumber.
I don't even think I've ever heard
Dance of the Cucumber. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Larry is narrating in Spanish, and Bob comes and translates it into English.
Dang. All right.
Watch the cucumber. See how he moves.
Barber
Like a
Manatee was
lion.
the only one that I could think of that had like a different language in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, so we're still at 2-0. Still at 2-0. This next song is God is Bigger.
Oh, you're not supposed to tell us a song.
Yeah, I am, because now I'm doing to finish the lyric.
Oh, okay. All right.
All right, here we go. Okay, here's the lyric. Because God is bigger than the boogeyman, he's bigger than blank
Ding,
or
ding,
the
ding.
blank
Ding,
on
ding,
TV.
ding, ding,
AJ.
ding, ding. God is bigger than the boogeyman. He's bigger than Godzilla or the monsters on TV.
That is correct. Godzilla and monsters.
Come on.
All right, now we go 2-1.
I just love how AJ has to sing the whole song.
do,
You
guys.
can't just say the words.
My favorite part of that was, I guess we're not recording this visually, but AJ actually was dancing.
Had to get a little vibe going. You know what I'm saying?
All right, this song is known as His Cheeseburger. It is a silly song with Larry. All right? It says this, the lyrics, "'Cause he loves you, cheeseburger, with all his heart, and there ain't nothing gonna tear you two apart. And if the world suddenly ran out of cheese, he would blank blank on his hands and knees."
Blah, blah, blah. Fall down.
Is that a buzzer?
Yeah, that's
okay.
my buzzer.
All right, AJ.
Fall down?
Fall down. Incorrect.
Okay, I was just shot in the dark. I didn't actually know
Chris,
it.
I can't think of 2 words.
he would get down.
Get down.
Oh,
you're
come
so
on.
close.
I'm going to give you a half point just to make it
All
interesting.
right, 1.5. Chris 2, AJ 1.5.
Chris 2, AJ 1.5, going into the final question. Final question from the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything.
Oh, this is one I'm pretty unfamiliar with. I'm not going to lie.
Really?
It's good, yeah. This is one that was a little bit later on.
I might have a leg up.
Okay, yeah.
All right. Well, so for the Pirates Who Don't Do Anything, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have you finish the chorus of this song. I'm going to read you the verse, and then you have to finish by saying the chorus. Whoever can get the most of the chorus, we're going to call the winner.
Okay.
Ready? Here we go. We don't do anything. Well, I've never been to Greenland, and I've never been to Denver, and I've never buried treasure in St. Louis or St. Paul, and I've never been to Moscow, and I've never been to Tampa, and I've never been to Boston in the fall. Chris.
We are the pirates who don't do anything. We just stay home and lie around. And if you ask us to do anything, we'll just tell you, nope.
We don't do anything.
We
That
don't
was
do anything.
correct.
Okay.
We will just tell you we don't do anything.
Okay.
Well done, Deucer.
Chris, great job,
Well
man.
done.
And I love the
I
vocals
thought-
at the end. It's beautiful. You were made
I
for
thought
this.
they repeated Boston in the fall at the end, so that's why I got myself tripped up.
No, you were good. You crushed
Okay.
that. You crushed that.
Good
And
job,
We'll just
Chris.
tell you
Good job.
we don't,
we don't do
anything.
anything.
Yeah.
They don't repeat it, though?
I think at the very end.
The very end,
they
maybe?
repeat
Okay.
it. But I'm just gonna shoot you guys straight. That's my favorite VeggieTales song. The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything.
That's a good one, yeah.
Chris is not even content to win. He's content, like, when he makes sure that you tell him, hey, it's in there twice, and I need you to let me know.
I need you to look that up. So
I love it.
Okay, so
That was
we're
our-
just a quick little. Do you all remember there was a silly songs show just by itself where they just did silly song?
I think it was a compilation. They just did silly songs, right?
Yeah, but it
Because
was
here's how I know that is my senior year on a youth group trip. I was in the vehicle with the youth pastor, and he had the Silly Songs album. And guess what we listened to on repeat all the way to Panama City?
That's brutal.
It was brutal.
You would have been a ringer at this game.
It was brutal.
What's your favorite one? Favorite silly songs with Larry song? Go, you guys.
I like Barbara Manatee.
Okay, Barbara Manatee.
Yeah.
I just said Pirates Who Don't Do Anything.
I think the lip one's hilarious.
The lip one is
Because
Yeah,
when
the
you're
lip one's
watching, he's
really
got
good,
like the therapist, like black ink. It's a lip, it's a lip, it's a lip, it's a lip. It's just black. I don't know. I think it's hilarious.
Oh, man. Hey, we're glad that you guys are here for some solid spiritual content.
Well, if you made it
So
through 13
the episode is The Wonderful World of Entertainment.
The Wonderful World. Okay.
Is the one I'm thinking of. Here, I'll throw up a little thing so y'all can see.
Man, I love this. I love
crazy.
this.
Those
This is the Deucer.
Yeah.
This is why he has a mic.
Yeah.
So there's these two guys on this show. We'll just dive into this for a second. And the one tells a joke, and then it's an unpredicted answer to the joke. So it'll be like, knock knock, who's there? Orange, and then the guy will be like, he'll be like, orange shoe, and he'll be like, beans.
Yeah, just completely off the...
Just completely off. But isn't that a little bit how jokes are today?
I don't know,
They're
man.
just like...
Well, that's the point
These
of comedy,
younger
right?
generations.
The point of
tell you.
comedy is, hey, I'm going to get you going in this direction, I'm going to take you there, take you there, take you there, hard pivot, and then that's the punchline. That's what captivates. Now, I think there's a certain type of humor that everyone's going to appreciate, and not everyone's going to appreciate the same type of humor. And so there might be the person who's like, man, that was hilarious. The guy said beans, right? And there's going to be a type of purpose that's like, The Office is the stupidest show I've ever seen in my life.
Whoa.
What?
Whoa. You need to back up. I think, literarily speaking, I'm not sure that comedy has to be humorous to be comedy. Comedy is exactly what you said. It's when you like subvert expectations is what comedy is.
So are we comedians on Sunday? Do we just figure out that we're pastors / comedians?
All right. So speaking of Sunday,
am I hilarious?
No.
All right.
Matter of fact, some of the worst moments I've ever seen from stage in a church are by people who were convinced they were hilarious.
Yeah. Let the experts be the experts, man.
Cringe.
Not you. Cringe.
All right, so this Sunday, right, we continued on in Jonah, but there was also a couple other things happening this weekend. One was time change, grown. My favorite was somebody said that they told their kid who was super tired, it's like, well, you're tired because we lost an hour of sleep last night. And the kid said, somebody find it.
Somebody go get that, John. Yeah.
So we lost an hour of sleep, time change, but also it was Youth Turkey Weekend.
It was, yes. I know some of you dads, man, this is so funny to me, right? And I love it because I will be, I'm sure, but you have the dads that get the knock for like, you're living vicariously through your kid on the baseball field. And then you got the dads that are like, I can't believe you would let athletics do that. And then you're like, get up, son, we're going turkey hunting whether you like it or not. You know what I mean? You're like doing the same thing, but I love it because it's killing turkeys and it's great. And I think, you get some special moments in the woods with you and your kid. And I got to go with, Chad and Emery, and I'll say this, dude, that joker for, I think he's 9, maybe, right? I don't know, 9 or 10. That joker can sit still. I was shocked. He's a professional sitter. And I told Chad, I was like, dude, I don't know how many kids that are that age that would just tolerate what he just did over the last couple hours. It was incredible. But I know that definitely contributed to some of the sleep deprivation.
Did you come back empty-handed there?
We did, yeah.
Was it Emery's fault or yours?
No, it was probably, I told Chad, I was like, we left and I was like, do I suck? Am I a bad turkey hunter? Is that why we didn't kill this bird? But we had a bird gobbling good both Saturday and Sunday afternoon, and it just didn't want to. Well, first, we had this bird coming, right? And if you don't care about turkey hunting, I'll make this quick. But if you do, you're going to be like, I want more of that story. I'll take you to coffee. But we set up, and this bird hammers, boom, immediately Sunday afternoon.
That means gobbles for the uninitiated.
Thank you, yes. It starts gobbling, and that's the goal. Like, you want to get that bird to gobble and then come in so you can send it to meet Jesus. But it's gobbling and it's coming and it starts gobbling at 80, then it's at 40 and it's like really close. And all of a sudden I hear, some hen yelping down the road behind us. And I'm like, man, that got here way too quick. And I poke my head back behind me and I see a guy on his truck toolbox that's just pulled up on the side of the road for no reason because it's private property and starts yelping at this turkey that we're about to like take care of. You know what I mean? And we're about to unalive. Is that what they call it? Unalive, yeah.
Unalive.
And it ruined the whole thing. And
so it's this guy's fault.
I would say, if you're asking me, yeah, this guy showed up and ruined the whole thing. And
you do realize that we're done with the series excuses and we're in Jonah.
Yeah, it was a plausible reason, that we couldn't kill this turkey.
So if you have a guilty conscience because you scared off a turkey that a 9-year-old boy was going to harvest, then you need to reach out, let us know, and AJ would like to take you to lunch. Discuss it.
What if our inbox gets flooded? It was me, man. We have like 19 guys ruining turkey hunts.
That's hilarious. So we're like 15 minutes in by this point, and we still haven't talked about Jonah and the message from Sunday.
Yeah. So let's do that. Let's talk about Jonah in week 2. I know this week we really looked at a couple things. We looked at the means by which recapping the storm and the fish are grace, and then we looked at Jonah's response to that. And so I would love, because I think some of this is a little bit unclear, even though this would be week 2 of talking about this, I still think there's a stigma in people's head, right? Like when bad things happen, it can't be God's grace. Like how does this make sense? And so I guess specifically would love to hear you maybe unpack in a little bit more detail, maybe less detail, whatever you think fits based on what you unpack Sunday. But how is that storm grace? How does that storm end up being grace for Jonah in this moment?
I think that, the simplest way to understand this and to think about this is that the storm is grace because at the end of the day, it changes Jonah's direction from disobedience and sin toward repentance and thankfulness, you know? And it is not the inherent circumstance itself that is either good or bad, but that circumstance is a tool used by God. And because it was used to bring Jonah back to where God had initially called him, that's why we can say it's grace. We're not saying it wasn't painful, right? We're not saying it was the best day of Jonah's life. We're just saying that it was grace because of how God used it in Jonah's life.
So here's a fascinating question as I'm thinking about this, because I do this personally. I'm not saying this is how you should do it or this is what everybody should do, whatever. But I can't help but think about myself in that person's shoes, right? And so if I'm Jonah, here's my question. What's going on? Like, why all of a sudden is this an issue? And at what point do you think, because I don't know when I would think, I mean, obviously he gets there in chapter 2, and we'll talk about that, but at what point do you think he starts to realize this whole scenario is grace? Do you think it's in the storm? Do you think it's in the whale, the fish, whatever? When do you think Jonah's like, oh, this is God's grace?
I think that he realizes that it is grace as he is sinking and realizes, I'm about to drown. Because I think while Jonah probably did not immediately see the storm as grace, I don't think we're given any indication in the text. I mean, it's an argument from silence, but we're not given really any indication in the text that Jonah saw the storm as grace. I think it would be way easier and way quicker for him to recognize the whale as grace than it is for us, because we've read the story. We know that Jonah makes it out of the ocean alive. Jonah sinking down doesn't know he's going to make it out alive. And so when he's swallowed by the whale and realizes, wait, I'm alive, I think, at that point, maybe the light bulb goes off and he realizes, hey, that this was not God's judgment or punishment. This was God saving my life.
So, okay, follow-up question. How many hours into being inside this fish do you think he realizes it? Because
he was there a hot minute, right?
Yeah.
He was there a hot minute. I don't know. I think it's just conjecture, but I would say probably pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like if you realize it's this or you're already dead, I don't know. I think it probably happened pretty quickly, but I don't know that doesn't mean he didn't get a deeper understanding of it for those few days. Yeah. You know, and what you said is Jonah not realizing why the storm was happening. I don't think, let me just look back and double check myself. But as I'm kind of thinking through this, I don't think that we're given any indication. Yeah, in the text, we're not given any indication how long Jonah was on that boat before the storm came. But because he was in the belly of the whale 3 days and 3 nights, I mean, it's at least a logical assumption to think that was how long it took the whale to get him back to shore. Mm-hmm. And so it would be kind of weird for Jonah. Like, hey, man, I've been sailing for a few days now. Nothing's happened. Why a storm? Why now?
Right. Yeah. That's because you have this guy who, and we talked about this last week, but his circumstances all seem to indicate, did I do it? Did I get away from God?
Exactly.
Did God forget?
Especially if this didn't happen an hour into the trip.
And there's no Instagram, there's no X, there's no Twitter. So nobody's telling him like God didn't pick somebody else. There's just kind of this little dead period, however long that is, whether it's a couple of hours or days or whatever. But there's a moment where you can imagine he's probably like, all right, maybe God just said I'm wiping my hands of that guy, and he got somebody else to do my job.
Yeah.
And
I think also one thing that I know when I preached in Live Oak, the first message, and then in Lake City this week with this message, one thing I didn't specifically talk about is that it's actually the sailor, the captain, that wakes Jonah up in the storm. And so you got to think Jonah's initial reaction probably is, what's going on? Why is this a big deal? Mm-hmm. And we kind of get the sense that it slowly dawns on him, oh, wait, this is my fault. He doesn't immediately recognize this as God's judgment or God's grace. At first, it's just a storm.
Yeah.
But the more it keeps going, the more, hey, there's something supernatural to this. And then I think maybe after he's swallowed by the whale, he gets the grace side of it.
You ever get seasick?
I have gotten slightly seasick before. I've not been as seasick as you when I've been on a boat with you.
Yeah.
I've been on a boat with AJ, and my boy got seasick and was hurling over the side. But I want you to know the respect that this man gets from all fishermen everywhere, because that did not stop him from 1 minute of fishing, even though he was puking while he was reeling. That's what my guy was doing on this boat. So, I've not got super seasick.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm a get seasick kind of guy. I appreciate that. But that's like my normal. And so that's the other thing I'm like, putting myself in Jonah's shoes, and I'm like, dang.
I'm not going to call out two of the other guys who were on the boat who were like huddled up in the corner of the boat, seasick, not fishing.
Yeah, it would be tough to make sure Shane and Trey got mentioned on here about.
Well, I'm definitely not going to do it.
It's crazy. Yeah. But anyway, it's just another one of the things, like he's sleeping, and it kind of goes into what you talked about Sunday with that being more than just your average sleep, right? There's a lot going on out there, and just another one of those little things that I'm reading through, and I'm like, dang, if that was me, I'd be in a lot of trouble, because not only would I be, terrified, but I'd be miserable. In the middle of my being terrified, I'd probably be throwing up off the side of this boat with these Phoenicians.
Well, let's like stop there a minute and talk about Jonah's sleep, because one of the things that I brought out Sunday in the message is that I believe, and I'm not the only one, there are people, like I said, who have studied this a lot more, a lot smarter, a lot more experienced, who also see this as a picture of Jonah being dead in his sin, right? Mm-hmm. He descends to his grave, the bottom of the ship, goes into the deep sleep, death, and we know that we're dead in our sins until Christ makes us alive, and so this is God's grace because it made him alive.
Yeah.
But, nerd out just a minute here. I think when we do that, when we make that connection, let me say, for the first time of, this could be symbolic of that, you start to see that idea of descent and ascent in Scripture being very symbolic in other places. So let's just kind of zoom out for a minute in the book of Jonah, right? Jonah didn't just descend into the belly of the ship. You look, and it says that Jonah went down to Joppa. Mm-hmm. Right? So he left where he was.
Yeah.
He goes down to Joppa to get in the boat. From the boat, he goes he goes down to the belly of the ship. From the belly of the ship, he goes down into the sea. From the sea, he says, to the foundations of the earth, into the belly of the whale. So there is this descent in Jonah, but then in the end of chapter 2, beginning chapter 3 next week, he starts to make his ascent, back, right? So there's some symbolic nature in there as well. Again, it's not just in Jonah, it's everywhere in Scripture. You will see all over Scripture that when people go to Jerusalem, they go up to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
They go up to Jerusalem. Why do they go up to Jerusalem? Well, one, geographically, Jerusalem is one of the highest points in Israel. It's on a mountain, very literally. And so to get to the city, you have to go into the valleys surrounding it and then go up to the city. But not just that, there's a spiritual kind of connotation there that this is the holy city and we go up to it. So it's just really interesting when you read the Scripture to see these layers of symbolism and imagery that can kind of clue you in on something. When somebody's going down to a certain place, might not be a good thing. And when they're going up to a certain place, hey, maybe something important is about to happen. And when they go down, they go up. That's not necessarily going north or south. Now, it could be going, geographically higher elevation, lower elevation, but also, hey, maybe there's something else going on here. So I think that's pretty neat to just kind of be aware of as you read the Scriptures.
Yeah, I think, you see that even fleshed out in the New Testament, right? With our celebration of baptism, our recognizing of that, Jesus ascends into heaven, he ascends from the grave, and that's the symbolism there. So I think that's a cool thought. You see that all over the place. In fact, Sunday I told people, I said, what cooler Sunday to get baptized than on the Sunday where we see that come to life. We see Jesus beat death, hell, and the grave. And so I'm excited about that because Easter Sunday we're doing baptism. So shameless plug. Yeah, I love it. So you have the storm. That's grace because it's reorienting Jonah. It's getting his attention. It's waking him up. It's saying, hey,
it's waking him up. Sometimes the harshest judgment of God is just where he lets us go, gives us over to our own desires.
Man, this wasn't necessarily planned, but unpack that for a little bit because I think that's something that I want to make sure is super clear because I think sometimes we fall into the trap of thinking, well, maybe God's not that angry. Maybe God's left me alone. And in a way, maybe he has, and that's not good, right? And so maybe unpack that a little bit.
Well, I think, and maybe we can come back and lean into this a little bit more here in just a minute, but I think the fact that we think God leaving us alone means he's okay with us maybe should be a red flag in and of itself, right? And the reason it feels like judgment when we go into a storm like this that's bringing us back to him is because rather than have his presence, we'd just rather be left alone, right? And so that's why it doesn't feel like grace. It feels like judgment in that moment because why aren't you leaving us alone? That's what I really want. Well, that's the problem. That's what you want. That's not what you should want.
Right.
And so I do think that there's something there. But particularly when I say that I think one of the harshest judgments of God is that he would turn us over to our own flesh, our own desires, give us our own way. I think we have to understand that all of us are born with a sin nature. You know, we are not born inherently good people who make good decisions for the good of everyone around us. You know, we are selfish and sinful creatures, and in our selfish sinfulness, we still screw ourselves over more than we realize, because we are by nature self-destructive. We are by nature carnal creatures, and it is the grace of God that is bestowed on humanity in general that keeps us all from being as bad as we could be. You know, I heard a pastor say one time, and it's kind of stuck with me ever since. It's nothing super profound, but he says, "There but the grace of God go I." And the idea is, when I see somebody whose life is a mess, who is just turned over to sin, that's just a wreck, broken, falling apart, well, the reason I'm not there is not because I'm better than them. It's because God's grace has kept me from being as bad, as wicked as I could be. And so what we call that sometimes is prevenient grace, that God's grace prevents us from being as wicked and depraved as we could be. And so the judgment of God then oftentimes comes when he just pulls that hand back and lets us have what we want. Paul alludes to this in Romans chapter 1, that he just goes his own way. But I think more than just a theological concept, this is something that we all understand naturally and practically in our personal relationships.
So that's what I was going to ask you next, is for the person who does not presuppose what you just presupposed, right? Because I think your theology...
You mean the person who's wrong? Go ahead.
Sure. The theology influences what you think and what you just said,
absolutely.
right? And so I have no theology, I have no framework. All I know is that I seem to try to be a pretty good guy, and I seem to try to do the right thing, and I help somebody when they need a couple bucks or whatever.
Yeah.
What would you say to that person to help them, I think, get on the same playing field? Because you're not going to appreciate grace until you understand why you need it. And
so get on the same playing field as in we're all sinners, or get on the same playing field of how do they understand that God's judgment is just leaving us alone?
That we're all sinners, because you got to start there.
Okay. So starting there, I would say the human condition is inherently sinful when we just look at humanity as a whole. One of the things that I find very convincing, if not completely convincing, very convincing, is who decides to teach kids to lie.
It's fascinating.
Isn't it, though? I mean,
as
like,
an owner of 2 kids, it's fascinating.
Isn't it? Like, you discourage it. You say that we can't do this. We have to have trust in our relationship, and yet they lie. Yeah. Nobody has to tell them to do that. Nobody has to tell them to be disobedient. Nobody has to teach them to pitch a fit. You know, that's just who we are. And I think when you push on any person, nobody would tell you they are perfect and that they're not sinful. Their issues are, well, even though I'm sinful, I'm not that sinful, so the judgment you're talking about does not reflect my level of sinfulness. Yeah. And at that point, I think the conversation has to switch to your sinfulness is not just against other people. Your sinfulness is against an infinitely holy God, which makes it infinitely punishable.
Yeah, there's
that's
standard.
That's a very condensed version, but it's the idea.
Yeah, you could spend a whole podcast, I think, on Romans 1 through 6, unpacking some of that stuff, but
well, let me go a little bit further with that and say, I think even a person who is not willing to concede the inherent sinfulness and depravity of man being held back by the hand of God, so they would not see God just leaving us alone as grace or as judgment. They would say, well, that's grace. He's just letting me do my thing, right? Because that's what we want. We're Americans. We just leave us alone, stay out of our business, let us do our thing. However, when you let somebody be and kind of cut off that relationship, that's judgment in our personal relationships, right? Like, think of broken relationships where somebody's like, I don't want anything to do with you anymore. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. I'm done. That's not grace. That's judgment. They're not like, oh, finally, you know, that's great, or that's judgment. The scene that keeps coming to my head, and, you know, pardon me if you don't think this is a good TV show to watch, but it was one of the best TV shows that aired on TV for a long time was Breaking Bad, right? Now, I'm not sure it's the cleanest show, but it's not as bad as some. It's a good show, right? And there's a character on the show, Jesse, who is a drug addict, right? And his family is upper middle class family, loved him well, has a younger brother doing well at life. Jesse's the disappointment. He's the drug addict in the family. He comes back to mom and dad. I'm going to get clean. I'm going to get straight. I'm going to get my life together. And they're going to, okay, we're going to give you one more chance. Well, when he blows it, we're done. We can't have anything to do with you anymore. We're stepping back. We just can't. And they end that relationship. All the things they had been doing in his life to try to help him, they pull away from. that is a devastating scene in that show because he understands this is judgment and they can't do worse to me than this.
Yeah.
And so when we say that God leaving us to ourselves is his judgment, it's that same thing. What else can God do than say, all right, if you don't want a relationship with me, if you want to continue to live in your disobedience and sin, I'm not going to stop you. What worse judgment is there?
Cue the fish in the storm. And so now, not only has there been a storm to get Jonah into the water, but, it just so happens, never just happens, right? God's already prepared this next moment and says, hey, Jonah, when you hit the water, here's what's going to happen next. I have another version of pursuit for you. And
well, I mean, in fairness, I don't think that he told Jonah what was about to happen. I think Jonah thinks, I'm drowning.
Yeah, this is God's conscience talking to itself, I guess, in a way.
Yeah.
Jonah has no
Trinity.
idea.
He is Trinity.
Yeah.
No, Jonah thinks he's drowning. And like I say, I think Jonah probably saw the whale as grace quicker than the storm. And after the whale, the storm started to make sense because now Jonah can understand, hey, both of these are God preserving my life.
Yeah.
And my life uncomfortable in the belly of a whale is better than my life comfortable on a ship headed away from God's presence.
Man, I feel like that's such a hard concept for us to grasp because I think there's a study, Daniel sent this to me, 4 years ago maybe now, and in the 90s, they came out with a study and said, people are intellectual creatures. We are thinkers. We're trying to transcend what we feel with what we know and yada, yada, yada. And it was a hypothesis, and they came out with a new study in the mid-2000s, I think around 2010 maybe. Could be wrong, but basically the gist of that study was, we were wrong. People are emotional creatures. They're not thinkers. They're not intellectuals. They're going to be driven by their feelings more than they are by what they think and what they know. And so you get to this point, and I say that to say, I think it's important to realize when we get to these moments, we are not going to always pick what's best. Yeah. And so it's good for God who knows what's best to look down and say, hey, you're not going to pick what's best, and so I need to grab you and reorient you and show you that it's better to be right here than it would be over there. And I think you see that in the picture of Jonah, and I think you see his emotional response getting to that point, right? Like, hey, I hate this idea. I do not want to go to Nineveh, and so I'm going to emotionally respond, and I'm going to let that drive me to the other side of the world. And then God says, hey, I'm not going to let your emotions transcend what I know is right and what I know is better for you, and so I'm going to grab you, and I'm going to bring you back here. But I think that's so hard for us because when we engage and we interact with what we feel and what we know and what makes us happy, and we start to filter those things, it's like, man, I like those things more than I like the idea of maybe a little bit of misery with God, because that's how I start to see God. And I think one of the things that we say quite often is God's not as concerned with your happiness as he is with your holiness. And I think what God knows about your holiness is at some point in eternity, you mentioned this, it's going to translate to true joy and true happiness. But right now, in your sinful condition, you're struggling to see what is more valuable right here. And so I think it's another way God's grace is like, man, hey, you're not going to pick the right thing because you're an emotional creature. Let me grab you and let me reorient you here with me.
I think that's 100%. You know, that's 100% why it is so hard for us to identify grace in events in our lives, because we don't prioritize things as we should, so that we don't feel them as we should, right? What we feel dictates what we believe, not the other way around. That's where you started this, right? And I completely believe that. People will change their beliefs on a dime if it matches what they want to do. So our desires and our feelings influence what we think. Because of that, our desire for comfort, for ease, for security, for peace, air quotes around that peace, our desire for all those things then make us think that anything that comes against that is judgment. It's not good. It's bad. But at the end of the day, when we know from Scripture that those things are not inherently the highest good that God has for us to enjoy, if something strips those from us but pushes us closer to Jesus, it wasn't bad, it was good. But we don't feel that, because though we would like to think that we value intimacy with Jesus over those things, in reality we don't. I'll say this, in reality I don't.
Sure.
I may have moments that I do. In the general flow of my life, I'm sure I don't. And so that's what makes it so hard to recognize those moments when they come. And that's why they feel like judgment, or they feel like anger, or they feel like betrayal, and they don't feel like grace. And it's because it's taken from us what we want.
Yeah, man. So here's, and I was talking to you a little bit about this before we ever started recording, but here's a subplot in that, I think, again, inferring, but you have Jonah, and now he's in the belly of a fish, whale, whatever, for 3 days. And was the first thing we see him do?
I think that the fish whale dichotomy is way overblown.
Sure.
I think it was a whale that was a fish. You know what I mean? Like, anyway, go ahead.
But what's the first thing Jonah does in chapter 2? It's the first thing we see him. It's the first thing we see him do is pray. Yeah, he prays. So here, all of a sudden, God's grabbed him and he said, "Hey, don't run the other direction. I want you right here. By the way, I'm stripping away any outside influence in this moment. There's no other voice you're going to hear. It's you in the belly of a fish." And what's Jonah's first response? It's prayer, right? He gets reoriented by God, and his first response is, okay, I've got nothing to do in this belly besides talk to God, besides pray. And I think that is maybe symbolic, maybe as practical as it gets when it comes to how little we spend time with God because of our distractions and because of our emotions. Here's Jonah. I have none of that. I guess I should pray.
So this may have well been the first monastery.
Yeah, right?
Like,
yeah.
He's isolated from everything, got time for nothing else, which is a good thing. Again, right? When we are pushed into intimacy with God, it's a good thing. I'm sure it was very isolating for Jonah, but sometimes we need that. I think that is why when you look at spiritual disciplines in our life, silence and solitude are a part of spiritual discipline. We all ought to have times in our life, times throughout our year, and probably more regularly than that, when we are able to be by ourselves in silence.
Yeah.
Not because that's the only time that God is going to speak to us, but to remind us of how often the other voices in our life can drown out his voice.
Yeah.
And so that silence and solitude is needful. And I had this conversation with someone this past week. I think sometimes, like in Jonah's case, when we are not actively practicing that silence and solitude, it is forced on us.
Yeah.
Oftentimes.
Graciously, right? Not
graciously. Painfully and graciously.
Yeah. And here's, again, here's what's fascinating. The last thing he hears before he gets to nothing, no other voice besides God, is a bunch of pagans worshiping the God that he's about to be in isolate. They make vows to him, and then Jonah gets like he's in the ocean, and so the last thing he hears is, these pagans who are not God's people are worshiping God, and I wasn't. And now I've got 3 days to sit here with my thoughts and with God and start to unpack some of this.
Yeah, it's really, Jonah is such a fascinating character. Jonah is an onion. He has layers. He has layers all over the place.
Yeah.
And I have often wondered if Jonah telling the sailors, pick me up, throw me in, the seas will become calm. I wonder if that's Jonah being noble,
sure,
and sacrificial, or Jonah saying, just kill me. I don't care. I'm done.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I think based on his response, even if that was his attitude going in the whale, it changes while he's in the whale. But man, Jonah's a fascinating character, because he very well could be saying, just kill me, throw me overboard. I'm done with this. I'm not gonna whatever.
Yeah.
Which is crazy, because what you see and learn in that is that Jonah is running from God's presence, not just because he's scared to go to Nineveh. We touched on that in the first week, but because he's mad.
Mm-hmm.
He's upset. Jonah's an angry guy because of what he knows God's going to do. But we can talk more about that in a couple weeks.
Yeah. Here's the last thing I would say about that. I think the other thing that, again, inferred, but absolutely happens, is he's probably not eating in the belly of this whale for 3 days. And so it's almost like God forced him into he thrusts him into a fast, and he's like, hey, not like, you're not going to have anything but me. No food, no water, no anything. It's just me and you for the next 3 days, baby. And we're leaning in.
AJ, we just hit on this. Hey, Deucer, I need you to do something for me. I need you to Google the Jonah fast and see if anybody's done this yet.
The Jonah fast.
Because we have the Daniel fast, right?
Yeah.
Where you just eat what Daniel ate, and he was healthier and better, and somebody made $1 million off of the Daniel fast. So here's what you do, AJ. You write a book called the Jonah fast, and you only eat stuff you could find in the belly of a whale.
Boom. And to start the fast, you have to wrap seaweed around your head.
I love it.
Chapter 2.
Where are we at? Is there something out there?
The Jonah fast.
Yeah, I see some, like 3 3 whole days.
Oh, we blew
man.
it. We're late.
Representing that time he was in the fish.
We were close.
Man,
we were close.
We thought we were original. We're not. So here's where we'll kind of round this out. I know we're getting into it. We're kind of coming up on this, but I do think I want to touch on this because I want you to speak some clarity into this where you can. But we have these moments, and I think what we've been saying is for the believer, this is true. God's saying, hey, I want your attention. I want you to be back with me. I know this is better. Is there a caveat there for the unbeliever? Is this true for the unbeliever? Is it just God's judgment in that moment for the unbeliever? Is it condemnation? Is it God's grace still saying, hey, what is that? I guess would be my question.
Man, I think that this may be doubly true for the unbeliever because I do believe that the Lord disciplines those he loves. And so there are some things in life that are discipline, but even those disciplines are grace for the believer because, he's doing it because he loves us to draw us closer to him, make us more like him. For the unbeliever, I think that there are things that God brings in their life to get them to the point where they are ready to trust him as Savior.
Yeah.
It can be harder to see that and understand that as an unbeliever. And I'm sure that until you cross that line of faith and submit to Jesus as Savior, that you never see that. And so I get the difficulty of it, but I don't think that makes it less true for the unbeliever. Sure. I think that, again, what happens to you where you are 5 million years from now is infinitely more important than what your life looks like for the next 50 years. I get the difficulty of that question, so I don't want to make it like a cliche, simple answer, but I don't think it changes the truth. I think that sometimes God can put unbelievers in painful situations to get them to the point of belief.
Yeah. So we'll ask this question, and then it'll kind of segue us into what's happening over the next 20 days. But what's next? So I feel this, right? Okay, Chip, you preached this sermon last week. I've been hearing this in Live Oak and Brantford, and I hear all about how sometimes God's grace to me are these circumstances I don't like. What do I do? What's my next move?
Well, I think the biggest push up to this point has not been that anything we've talked about will change those circumstances. I think ultimately where we want to get to with the book of Jonah is a desire for obedience in the life of believers. But I think right now, the what's next is I would just hope that those who have kind of come this far in the series with us would begin to have a new set of eyes by which they evaluate things in their life, that they would not be quick to dismiss something as random or as God's mad at me, but they would kind of lean deeper into that. Because I was thinking about this morning, when you understand that anything that pushes you closer to Jesus is ultimately grace for your good and for his glory, man, that is an anchor for the soul that can never be taken away, because there's absolutely nothing in life that you cannot walk through and even in many ways embrace if you believe that truth, that if this is what Jesus is doing to bring me closer to him, it may be painful, I may not like it, but I can lean into it and trust because I believe that he is the highest good and he loves me more. And so I'm going to lean into this believing that in the end, he is going to be faithful to work this together for my good and his glory, even if it's painful right now.
Yeah, that's good. Man, I think some of that response is, and I think you look at Jonah's response and you model some of that too. And you say, hey, prayer, right? Hey, let's spend time together. Hey, I want to understand. I'm trying to understand, God, this is grace. Can you show me how, where, whatever? I'm going to keep leaning in, even if I don't know right away, because a lot of times you're not going to know right away, but keep leaning in. And I think specifically we lose some of that whenever we don't spend time there, right? And it's hard for us to see that when we don't spend time with him. And so I love what we're doing over the next 20 days. We're going to spend time with him, specifically guided prompts. And so even if you're one of those people that's like, well, I don't really know how to pray, we're giving you the prompt and we're saying, hey, here's the conversation we want you to have with God. There's no magic sauce in how you say what you say. It's just, hey, God, I want you to know this is what I think, this is what I'm asking, that kind of thing. And so over the next 20 days, we're going to be praying for people. And I would love for you to walk us through the 3 different themes, because I know you kind of cleaned some of that language up, but walk us through that.
Yeah, so, AJ, this was your idea that we would have 21 days of focused prayer from all of our locations, centered around Easter, and we want to see God do in our church in our midst in Easter. And I think sometimes we don't ask God to do things, and I think we don't ever want to be guilty of that. You know, I'm sure you've heard a pastor say this before too. What would you have different in your life now if God gave you everything that you prayed for last week? You know, you know, it's interesting, right? And so around Easter, we want to see. Immediately, I'm thinking AJ's like, I'd have a turkey. I tell you that. But
I have a much grumpier wife. You know? But I'm grateful. Not last week, but many years ago. And so it's good to see His sovereignty over my stupidity. And
That's
I have
right.
A wonderful wife that I have.
That's
now.
Right. Garth Brooks, theologian. Sometimes I thank God for unanswered prayers.
Yeah.
All right. So the next 21 days, actually, like you said, 20 by this point. Over those 3 weeks, we're going to have different prayer focuses over those 3 weeks leading up to Easter. This week, our focus in prayer is that we want to pray for those who don't know Jesus, praying that they would come to know Jesus. And you said, AJ, Sunday in Lake City, that, hey, when you pray that, be ready for God to say, all right, you're going to be the tool that I use to make that happen. So pray for those who don't know Jesus. Next week, we're going to pray for those who are disconnected from the church. Man, this is such a rich field for the harvest in our area. People who have made professions of faith, whether real or not, we're not looking at this point, just they've made professions of faith, and yet they're totally disconnected from the church. Not just a local church, yes, but the church wholly. Mm-hmm. And so we want to pray this Easter that God would use this time of year to help them reconnect to His bride and His body. And then the third week, we want to pray for those who just need to be revived and renewed, right? Like maybe they're tired, maybe they're burned out, maybe life has been hard. We just want to pray for them that this Easter would be a time of reviving and renewal in their life. And so, as you said, AJ, the next 3 weeks, we're just going to be banging on that door of heaven together and saying, God, here's what we are asking you to do. And we're asking you to do this because we believe you can and we believe you desire to. Mm-hmm. And so we want you to use our prayers to be the means that you accomplish this. So we're going to pray, and we know that you can and that you want to and desire to, so we're going to believe that you will.
Man, I personally am excited on the backside of these 21 days to hear stories of, man, this is what happened to so-and-so, and this is what they decided to do, and just all that kind of stuff, because I do believe when we ask God to move, especially when it's something He already wants to do, He's eager to do that too, right? And He's more eager than you and I are to save those people, right? I think He loves us that much. We'll never love the people in our lives more than He already does. And so I just am excited to see this on the backside.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good. I love that Easter is a season of expectation. For me, Easter is a season of expectation even more so than Christmas, right? And I love the fact that we can look forward expectantly to that Easter Sunday morning, knowing how that story ends and that we get to be a part of it still, and that the God who raised Jesus from the dead is still working in people's lives, changing people's lives, and answering prayer. And so I'm excited.
Come on. Yeah, that's good. I always wonder when I look at our little sheet, like, is this going to take us 50 minutes? This time it took us 53. And so it's been good. It's been a good conversation.
Well, at least 3.5 of that were you and Chris singing VeggieTales. And
some people are saying 13 of that. It's me and Chris singing VeggieTales, which I love, baby. Come on. Shout out to the Deucer. Nailing it.
You know what? If they ask us to do anything, we'll just tell them. We don't do anything.
We don't do anything.
That is poetry right there.
Chris does everything.
Everything.
We love you, Chris. We're grateful for you, man. We're really glad you're with us. Yeah.
All right. Well, I don't know if it'll be next week, but feels like it's time to maybe bring in some more special guests again.
Yeah, I agree.
Conversation going. So we'll see what we can do there.
Yeah, we'll drum somebody up. It'll be good.
I like it.
All right. Speaking of drumming, next week, spitting and drumming, baby. Gobbling. Here we go. Turkey season on the 16th. Fire me up. All right. Sorry, take us home. Take us away.
I don't know what that was. All right.
All right. We'll see y'all next week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow in this journey of faith and embrace community. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us through our social media channels or visit our website and stay connected. Your questions are what make this podcast a dynamic and enriching experience. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your engagement helps us spread the message and connect with others who may find value in these conversations. Until next time, we hope this episode inspired you and will help you bring Sunday's message into your week ahead. Keep the conversation alive, and remember, we're all on this journey together.